This is a real treat to get to talk with Craig today because not only is he a fantastic business leader and strategist in his own right, he also has the opportunity to work with business leaders of all stripes in his professional career as an EOS implementer and outgrow advisor. Craig, welcome to Profiles in Leadership.
Thank you, Tanis. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's really a treat. You are absolutely someone that I have been proud to recommend to companies in the past. I think very highly of you as a leader. And so let's just go ahead and get into it. When we talk about leadership, one of the really interesting questions is what formative experiences have you been through that really informed your own ideas about leadership or gave insight into the leadership process and how do they, how do your ideas about leadership impact the teams you advise or the clients that you work with?
Yeah, I love that. What first comes to mind? I was given a leadership opportunity. I was probably mid-20s when I took my first role as a leader and manager of a functional area. But what stands out, so that was kind of where I cut my teeth, just really discovering the challenges involved in leading and managing other people. I was asked to join the executive team of another startup that was formed, and in that growth, within 3 years, we were positioned for acquisition. So what comes to mind when I think about leadership, like real impressions that were made, is that once we were acquired, there was a mindset shift for me that we were always hiring. We went from 25 employees to 150 employees over the following 5 years.
Wow.
And so to step into a mindset that it was all about talent, it was all about clarity, it was all about casting the vision for where we were going, and then just really, really trying to work through that process of interviewing, asking the right questions, trying to get the right people into the building, get them in the right seats. So I felt like it was that shift, whereas before it felt like it was more of an inconvenience and an obstacle when I would
Mm-hmm.
need to place somebody into a role.
Mm-hmm.
Really just because I didn't have the reps or even the mindset to go after that more full time. So I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
was formative because it really changed the way that I thought about the value of placing good people into a position, and the process for doing that and really trying to get thoughtful and proficient in that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a fascinating kind of just evolution to undergo. Um, I would be curious, when you were building out those teams and like kind of on that continual um, expansion of the team or in that mindset, are there specific characteristics or leadership qualities that you looked for that, maybe even just as you innately kind of gravitate toward in leaders or in thinking through like for the specific team, and I don't know if those overlap or they're very different or
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, it really depended on the role. Capacity was one thing that I learned to look for.
Mhm.
Because we were growing, it was really important that I was trying to understand what could you contribute to not only where we are, but where we're going. So
Mhm.
I was trying to hire into the capacity I knew I would need as we grew.
Mhm.
So capacity was one, and that was largely emotional capacity. So
Hmm.
individuals' ability to be empathetic or to navigate some of the nuance of interpersonal communication, those sorts of things were
Yeah.
high values for me. But also time capacity as well, the
Yeah.
ability to structure time and understand how many moving parts and pieces there were, what
Mhm.
impact those moving parts and pieces might have. Uh,
Mhm.
so besides just technical proficiencies, depending on the position, I was doing mostly, this would have been mostly on the user experience side, some of the software development, some of the graphical design. So just
Mhm.
more on the front end of the software lifecycle that we had.
And
Uh,
when you talk about emotional capacity as that relates to like a software developer or something, I'm curious, like how do you sort of screen for that, or how do you identify those characteristics?
yeah, yeah, great question. So it often is with a question, and I like to just leave them open-ended. As
Mhm.
far as accomplishments, I like to ask about accomplishments. So tell me about something that you've done in the last year that you feel especially proud of that made an
Mhm.
impact in your world. And so then to listen for how clear they are, how concise they are, just as kind of a proxy for their ability to not only grasp the question, but understand they're talking to me.
Mhm.
It's not just an academic, exercise. It's
Yeah.
just hearing how they formulate their thinking and how they're trying to respond to what I'm saying, even their ability to pause and say, okay, I completely lost my train of thought. Can you ask the question again? Uh,
Yeah.
just the ability to see that they're actually maintaining a human to human connection, not just
Hmm.
a question.
Hmm. That's really interesting. Now I'm fortunate enough to know you, both in the workplace and then personally. And I know that you are a very kind of just intrinsically like mission driven, like values oriented person. So now I'm going to ask you, what values do you hold real, that are very integral to kind of like who you are or your worldview or how you go about your business and your life? And then, how have you been able to sort of um, integrate those values into the companies or that you advise or the people that you work with, or do you, is it a different process? Are you looking to first work with people that are kind of aligned on those and then together or do you, as a consultant, do you, how do you kind of merge your own values with the values of the companies that you work with?
Mm.
There's a lot of questions there. We can break it down. Let's start with just you.
Yeah. Yeah. So personal values. I know for me, one of them is wholehearted. Uh,
Hmm.
where to me, the reason that's significant is I think sometimes it's not uncommon, or the tendency can be to come into something half-hearted.
Yeah.
Uh, and that it's kind of a mystery to unpack what that means, but I think we all
Hmm.
know the experience when we watch somebody's performance or we interact with them. We just have this sense like they're just not all there. Uh,
Yeah.
it's some part of them is somewhere else.
Mm.
And that not only is costly in terms of productivity, but it's also just impacting in terms of connection and
Mhm.
impact. And so I think wholehearted is one. I like to come at things with my whole heart and make sure that I'm fully present.
Mhm.
Work through, where might I be distracted, or what other
Mhm.
things are pulling on my attention, or even my priorities or values.
Mhm.
Um, and just making sure that if I've committed to something, I'm in fact committed to it. My whole heart is in it. Uh,
Mhm.
and then working through all of the reasons as to why I might not want to commit, or so. Even down, maybe that would be the second one, is kind of the do what you say value.
Mhm.
Make sure that if I commit to something, I'm fully committed.
Mhm.
I have the full freedom and flexibility to say no. No is always a good
Mhm.
answer, and sometimes it's the right answer. Uh,
Mhm.
but just making sure that that level of commitment is there. And then I think how that transfers over when I work with my clients, my most successful clients are fully committed to the process.
Mhm.
They understand the power of commitment, and so I can see that wholeheartedness at work. It's like
Mhm.
they're all in. They've done the evaluation, they've done the vetting, they've surveyed their options. Now they're committed, and we just get to run. And there's such freedom there, I think, when you are fully wholehearted to a direction.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a wonderful, very succinct synopsis of really like it sounds like you're kind of encapsulating alignment, right? So, and just to go off script for a second, um, when you're kind of vetting companies that when you're figuring out like, are we going to be able to work together? Is there a process that you kind of have there to identify if there's alignment or if that's going to be a good fit?
Hmm. Yeah, I do. Part of my intake is typically just a conversation, but what I'm listening for, I'll ask a handful of questions. And what I'm listening for is what I would summarize as openness and honesty, or
Hmm.
open and honest.
Hmm.
And I don't mean moral honesty. I mean just a level of candor to talk about
Hmm.
what's really going on. Uh,
Hmm.
and often we're not. So as far as honest, often we process things at a level of detail or a level of impact that we just don't share. So
Hmm.
internalizing those, and that leaves a lot
Hmm.
of goodness off the table that we could
Hmm.
talk about or we could explore. Uh,
Hmm.
and that really becomes an inhibitor to performance if we move
Hmm.
forward. Is
Hmm.
that I don't know what I don't know, and
Yeah.
if it's not shared, then there's no way we can talk about it.
Hmm.
And then the honest is really how do they respond to feedback? How coachable are they?
Hmm.
Some of my clients, this is the first coaching relationship they've been in, so they're kind of working through that relationship of
Yeah.
the level of transparency, because I'm going to model openness and honesty. I'm open to feedback. I'm open to trying things differently. I'm interested in what you have to say that I may not have heard before. And then honest is just let's get it on the table. Let's talk about it. here's something I noticed, or I noticed that you said that, or that was an interesting look. Tell me more about that. And just if we can't get past those sorts of things, not all that happens in the first 30 minutes, mind you. But in those early conversations, I'm really listening for, is this the kind of person who's coachable, and will they commit to a process long term?
Very impressive, and sounds like a really thoughtful, and I know firsthand that it's a successful process for you. That's great. Well, the last question that we ask our guests on Profiles in Leadership is, what does hiring for good mean to you? You know, this whole endeavor kind of started out with this idea of hiring for good. We love that it's iterative. We love that, anybody can kind of bring their own definition to the term. So I'd be really curious to hear yours.
Mm. I love that. It's actually a fun question, because I find that I spend a fair amount of time thinking about what is good. Uh,
Mhm.
and my working definition of good is simply two words. It's right relationship.
Mhm.
So, for instance, my daughter made dinner last night. It was amazing. And when I say it was amazing, typically we mean in plain language, it was good. And by good, we mean that somehow the relationship of all the ingredients was just right. So
Mhm.
the flavors were there, everything was on point, and it was delightful to take, part in. So I find that the same applies to the hiring process, to the staffing or placement
Mhm.
process. Is not only do I want to make sure that my organization is rightly related to our mission. So do we know
Mhm.
who we serve? Do we know how we serve them for maximum impact? So if those relationships are all right, that's good.
Mhm.
And then if I'm hiring somebody, how do I make sure that I understand what they can contribute, what they want to contribute, what I need to contribute? And to me, as we work through all those dynamics and we get those relationships rightly aligned, or get things in right relationship, that is I think, our common experience of good. It might
Mhm.
feel philosophical, but I'm trying to make it as practical and simple as I think we experience it. Is when things are rightly related, we experience goodness. So for me, hiring for good would be through that lens, is make sure the organization is aligned rightly to make its impact, and then hire people to get them in position to contribute to that impact in a way that benefits them as well.
Well, I don't think that I've ever had anyone state it more beautifully. So I've been doing this for over a year now. Well done, Craig, and thank you
Mm,
so much for your time. I am honored to have you be my guest on Profiles in Leadership. You're a leader I respect and am glad to know, and I really thank you for your time today.
Likewise, Tanis, thank you.
Thank you.